Hey y'all, I'm going to talk to you today about this next little lesson we need to cover, and it is how to find other zeros or factors when you are given a factor. Now, the word zero is not something that we've really talked about before, but a zero is just a solution to an equation. So, like, if you look over here at the x minus 4, if I were to set that equal to 0, then I would get 4 for an answer for x. That is a zero of that equation. So that's what that means. So what we're doing in this, though, is really not worrying about that. We will do that at the end. But what we're trying to do is really break down this polynomial into its factors, like this kind of stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what one of them is, and you're going to try to figure out what the other two are. Okay? So actually, you kind of already have the tools you need in order to get this done, because if x minus 4 is a factor of x cubed plus 2x squared minus 31x plus 28, if it is a factor, what does that mean should happen if we do synthetic division? You should get a 0 for a remainder, correct? Yes. Okay, so you already have that tool. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use synthetic division to figure out what happens when we divide x minus 4 by that, okay? So if you're writing notes, what you need to do is make a note of what we're going to do. We're going to use synthetic division to divide by given factor. And that's the one that's over here in the right-hand column, the x minus 4, okay? We're going to use synthetic division to divide that polynomial by the given factor, and we're going to see what's left over. All right, so let's go over here and do this. So in our little house over here, x minus 4 is your factor, so what goes here? Positive 4, that's right. So grab your coefficients from your polynomial, 1, 2, negative 31, and 28. We're going to do a little synthetic division there. So always bring down the first one. Multiply 4 times 1, you get 4. That number goes here. We're going to add and get 6. Try again. 4 times 6 is 24. Pay attention to signs here. Negative 31 plus 24 is a negative 7. And then 4 times negative 7 is negative 28. Oh, I like the way this is looking. All right, 0 is the remainder. So what does that mean about x minus 4? It is a factor. That's right. So honestly, one of the factors is this polynomial. Now, we can't factor it like this thing where we split it in half. You know, you can already see that ain't going to work. But we can still get factors by using this process and figuring it out this way. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to write what's left over when we divide. That is important. Okay, so this is just like doing a synthetic division problem. What is left over? Okay, so one less exponent on the answer. This will start with x squared. This would become a positive 6x, and this becomes a minus 7. Okie dokie. So here's one of our factors, x minus 4. My question is, can you factor what was left over when we divided out x minus 4? Absolutely, you can. This is an old factoring question. So x times x is x squared. Now, what multiplies to give you negative 7 but adds to give you 6? Well, you do not have very many choices, do you? We need a positive 7 and a minus 1. Guess what? That right there is what you want. So here's the deal. These two factors and this one, if you multiply all those together, you are going to get this polynomial, which is given to you up there at the beginning. So when I'm asking you to find the other factors, this is what I want you to do. Use synthetic division, divide by the one that I gave you. Tell me what's left over after you divide it out, and then factor what's remaining. And it should work every single time. You should be able to factor what's left over. Now, how are you going to know when you're messing up on this step over here? you don't get a remainder of 0. You know, that's got to be important. You got to get that remainder of 0. If you don't get a remainder of 0 when you divide by the factor I gave you, one of two things is wrong. Either you're wrong in your process or Ms. Brown gave you a bad problem, which could also be the case, right? Okay, so those are your 3 factors. All right, so let's get back to the directions. It says each polynomial in the left-hand column has 3 factors. We found all 3, one of which is in the right-hand column. All right, factor each polynomial completely and list all 3 zeros. Okay, so these are the factors, right? Yeah. Now, my question would be, what are the zeros? Well, this is the easy part. I'm trying to figure out where to write this. All right, so you actually need 2 answers on this. Here's my question. If I set each one of these equations equal to 0, what are we going to get for those numbers? The first one, we're going to get a positive 4. Second problem, x plus 7 equals 0. That would be a negative 7 when we set it equal to 0. And then the last one would be a positive 1. So there's lots of actual really cool things going on. And let me kind of make a little connection for you. You don't have to write this down, but just look. All right. Eventually, probably after Christmas, what we're going to do is talk about how this relates to a graph. Okay. So this right here is a polynomial that is a graph, and it's a cubic function, and it has a shape that looks sort of like this. Okay. And what we can do is we can find these zeros. Zeros are also another word for x-intercepts. So we can plot these things and we could find what the graph would look like. Okay, it's a cubic function. I call it kind of the snake graph because that's what it looks like. But we're going to do that probably after Christmas, so don't be freaking out. No, we're not graphing yet. Okay, what I want you to focus on right now is how to find the factors. And if you know the factors, what are the zeros? Can you do that? Yes, Ms. Brown, we can do that. Okay, so we're going to do another one. Ready? Okay, if you need to, somebody pause this video and y'all have a little discussion about any kind of questions that you've got, okay? I know you're really good at helping each other out. So pause if you need to so everybody can get caught up writing this down and then resume, okay? All right, let's go ahead and talk about example number 2. So let's change colors too. Let's do green. All right, so same kind of question. Here is a factor. So for the answers, we got 2 different things we want to give. We want to give the factor answers, and I've already given you one of them. All right, and then we want to give the zeros. And actually, if you know that factor works, what do you know one of the zeros is? -2. But remember, the zeros are just the solutions of the factors if you set them equal to 0. So if I do at the factor, set it equal to 0, that's where that's coming from. Whoop. Okay, it's really hard to write this little pen I got, but I'm trying. All right, so let's go ahead. How did we start this a minute ago? Synthetic division. Right, we're going to do synthetic division with what we're given and then figure out what to do from there. So in your little division house is -2. Grab your coefficients. I don't see anything missing. You still need to pay attention to that just in case it happens. But I don't see anything missing. Bring down your 1. Multiply, that's -2. Add, that's -9. I'm doing this a little bit quicker because I think y'all are probably pretty good at it by now. Multiply, you get -40. Your remainder is 0. All right. Double check and make sure that you got the same thing as me when you divided. That's important. All right, so in the other problem, what we did was we divided out the factor that I gave you. I'm giving you part of the answer. Then what you do is you use what you got left over from synthetic division, which is this right here. And then we factor that. So we want to factor this like an old problem because that's going to tell us those remaining 2 factors. And this should always be something that you've done before when you get to this point. You should never have anything to factor there that you've never seen before because we're not doing questions that are extremely difficult, okay? So factors of 20, the add or subtract to give you a -9. I hope 5 and 4 are the ones you thought of. We need both of them to be negatives. So here are your 3 factors. x plus 2, x minus 5, x minus 4. Now, if those are the factors, what are the zeros that correspond to these factors? We've already done -2. This would be 5, and this would be 4. Now, what are we really doing when we find the zeros? All we're doing is just changing the sign on the number that's in the factor, and that's really all it is, okay? So I hope this helps. I don't really think this is that bad of a lesson. I think y'all should be able to figure this out and do pretty well. So for this problem, I need both answers. I need the factors, and then I need the zeros, okay?